Hi, and thank you for joining me for another short talk. And today, friends, you're in for a special lecture. Tonight, friends, we will be discussing Deuteronomy chapter 18 once and for all so that we could put all the controversy to rest. And friends, just in case you've forgotten what Deuteronomy chapter 18 is about, friends, this is a chapter usually quoted by Christians and even Muslims to justify their prophets. For Muslims, Muhammad, and for Christians, Yeshua. And like I do with all my lectures regarding portions of Torah, I will only be using the Pashat, the plain literal meaning of the text, to make my conclusions. Now, one reason this chapter is so popular, especially for those of us who live in Christian societies, is because this is really the only chapter Christians use as a Torah mandate to believe in not just their Messiah, but in a Messiah in general. Now, some also include Genesis chapter 49, the portion that speaks of Shiloh arriving. But honestly, regarding that verse, both Christians and Jews have a hard time trying to understand what it's really trying to tell us. But regardless, if you ask the average Christian to give you a verse in Torah that speaks about some commandment to accept the Messiah when he comes, they will proudly state, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brethren, from your fellow Israelites, and you must listen to him." And they will say that for so many reasons, this is speaking about Yeshua himself, just like Muslims claim it's speaking about Muhammad, and even Mormons claim it's speaking about Joseph Smith. Regardless, it must be speaking about somebody. And more than this, the whole chapter is stated as a prescriptive and not just a descriptive account. In other words, it's commanding us to do something, right? It's commanding us to listen to this prophet. And again, friends, today we will only use the literal text to really try to get a grasp of what the Torah is trying to teach us here. However, friends, before we begin, let me ask you, what is the scenario that the Torah paints for exile? In other words, what does the Torah tell us, and what do we see throughout Scripture regarding pre-exile, exile, and redemption? And friends, anyone familiar with the narrative we see in Torah and in the writings and in the prophets knows that the scenario is that disobedience equals a prophetical intervention and then exile, right? In other words, in Jewish history, we don't see prophets appearing when times are good. No, but the opposite. When Israel begins to stray within the land of Israel, the Almighty, in his grace, always gave the Israelites a final warning through a prophet that he elected or raised up for that very purpose. In other words, if Israel chose not to heed the prophet's warnings, then exile would occur. Now, although we know that this was the usual scenario, how would the Jewish people know that this was something for them to expect? In other words, why would the Creator expect them to conform and accept his messenger in this manner if he did not in some way state it in Torah to begin with, right? Now, another thing you probably didn't know is that chapter 18 of Deuteronomy is the only chapter, the only part of the Torah that commands us to listen to prophets in the first place. As a matter of fact, Deuteronomy 18 also paints the same scenario that Deuteronomy chapter 28 and Leviticus 26 paints regarding disobedience leading to a possible exile. However, Deuteronomy 18, like we said, it introduces the role of the prophet, the aspect of prophetic intervention. And like anyone who studies Tanakh, you know that this is what we see repeated over and over again. The scenario of Israel emulating the practices of evil nations, and then the Almighty raising up for them a prophet that they must obey. Now, friends, let's read chapter 18 in context and see if the notion begins to make sense. Okay? Starting from verse 9.
When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. You must be blameless before the Lord your God. The nations you will dispossess listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so.
In other words, here it is saying that the other nations during turmoil listen to their witches and sorcerers. This the Lord forbids us to do. No, but rather the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet, up for you, Israel, a prophet. From among you, from your fellow Israelites, you must listen to him. Clear so far? Reading on.
For this is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb, on the day of the assembly when you said, let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God, nor see this great fire anymore, or we will die.
Now here again, it's referring to him speaking to us through a spokesman, because Horeb, as you know, is another word for Mount Sinai, and like we read in the Torah narrative, that after the Creator spoke directly to the Hebrews, to the Jewish people, that the people begged Moses to speak for God because they could not physically handle hearing directly from the Almighty. In other words, this prophet being spoken of here is someone who will speak for God. Now the question is this one prophet or many? Well, friends, we just read that when we begin to stray away from Torah, he will raise up for us the prophet. So unless Israel was only expected to stray from Torah only once, this could not in any way be only one prophet, right? Okay, let's read on.
The Lord said to me, what they said is good. Remember, he's speaking about when they were on Mount Sinai. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their fellow Israelites. I will put my words in his mouth. He will tell them everything I command him. Again, like he did throughout all the books of the prophets, right? Like he raised up Isaiah, Jeremiah, etc. Anyways, reading on, 19. I myself will call to account anyone who does not listen to my words that the prophet speaks in my name. But a prophet, who presumes to speak in my name anything I have not commanded.
So here, friends, is another key. Hanavi, or the prophet, who speaks in the name of other gods. Here it seals the notion that this is prophets in plural. Reading on.
Or a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods is to be put to death. You may say to yourselves, how can we know when a message has not been spoken by the Lord? If what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message that the Lord has not spoken. That prophet has spoken falsely, so do not be alarmed.
Now, there is no way in the world that you could ever read this chapter any other way again, because it is extremely clear when one reads it without commentary that this is referring to prophets in general. And if not, what other pasuk tells us to heed the words of prophets? In other words, if this was only referring to one prophet, what mandate did Israel have to obey any prophet post Moses? Now, you're probably also wondering, why do so many Meforshim, so many Jewish commentators state that this is also talking about the Messiah or one prophet? And really, to understand this, you have to first realize that there exists a messianic agenda and expectation that runs just as ferociously in Judaism as it does in Christianity. And as a commentator, author, or teacher, if you fail to meet that agenda, you are considered unenlightened. And worse of all, people don't buy your books and you don't eat. So thank God, apart from being a rabbi, I have a job and I can give you the uncut truth always, friends. So for more information about everything Jewish, please visit bejewish.org. Thank you.